In this video, we're going to bind our character to the bone using a few different methods and talk about bone strength. Before we begin working on the character, it would be good to first go over what is bone binding. So when you first create bones, you will notice that they don't exactly work the way you think they would. That is because by default, bones have bone strength, which influences or moves what is around it. But we need to tell Moho specifically what layers or points we want those bones to move. So there are 3 different types of binding methods. We will talk about each one, why they are used, and how to use them. So the first binding method I want to focus on is Flexi Binding. Now this allows you to take a set of bones and isolate the bone strength or influence from the rest of the rig. This is the fastest and easiest way to bring your character to life. So the best example for this is going to be these arms. So I'm going to do the front arm. So what you want to do to use the Flexi Binding method is you want to select the layer. So the layer that I want to connect to these 3 bones is the arm front layer. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to come over to this panel here. Now you can see that some things are changed a little bit. So I not only have my draw tools and I'm on a vector layer, but I now have this new tool palette right here for bone. Now this gives me the option to select a bone, to manipulate a bone, to bind a layer, or bind points. But right now what I want to do is I want to use the select bone tool or be on the keyboard. Again, get in the habit of using keyboard shortcuts. It's really going to help improve the speed of your workflow. So I'm going to select the 3 bones in this arm layer. So I'm going to click and I'm going to hold down shift, left click, and left click. Now with those 3 bones selected, I'm now going to flexi bind those in the bone menu. So I'm going to come up here to bone and use selected bones for flexi binding. Now you can see that these are now flexi bound because all 3 of these bones now have this thicker highlight on them. If you go back to this bone menu, you can also see, and I highly suggest getting into the habit of using keyboard shortcuts, is Control Shift F instead of having to go to the menu and select it each time. Now what we're going to use is the Manipulate Bones tool. Again, you can manipulate bones either on this vector layer with this tool here, or we can go back to the bone layer and we can manipulate it with this tool here. It's the same thing. And the keyboard shortcut is the same. It's Z. Again, get used to using that keyboard shortcut. So let's go ahead and manipulate this arm that we just bound. Now you can see as I use this manipulation, everything's all wonky. But now let's take a look at the difference between this manipulation. See, it's a little bit more clean than this one. That's because this is bone strength. Bone strength is basically what tells the bones to influence. Here, we don't have any sort of binding. We just have that strength. Here we have binding and strength. This just basically takes the general region and says, okay, I need to move whatever is in this area. What we did is we took and we isolated that bone strength. That's why if I move this leg right here, you can see that it's affecting this arm, but it's not affecting this arm because we now have this bound. So now nothing else will influence it. And if I hit T on the keyboard, this is going to bring me to my transform bone tool. And this is basically going to reset everything. Right now, I'm on frame 0 and everything is just kind of a testing area right now. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that this arm is bending properly. So again, let's hit Z on the keyboard for Manipulate Bones tool and let's go ahead and move this. Now there's a couple of things that's wrong. Right off the bat, this arm looks terrible and we can fix that by adjusting the bone strength. So let's do that. Let's come here to this icon right here for the bone strength tool and click on that. And now let's drag left and right and you can see how this bone strength is basically affecting this arm. Now a good amount of bone strength right off the bat is just enough to cover the vector layer itself. So I'm going to reduce this a whole lot. The next thing that I want to make sure of is that the arm right here, as I move it backwards and forwards, is not affecting anything here. I don't want this to be moving at all. So let's say I have a lot of bone strength right now. And you can see as I manipulate and I move this around, it's actually moving the entire arm. You don't want that. It's going to give you a lot of work in the long run to fix. So make sure that nothing is being influenced here. If things are moving and distorting down here, that's not as big of an issue as if things are moving up here. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to deselect that and I'm just going to go ahead and reduce that a little bit. And okay, so we're in a better spot. Nothing up here at this pivot is moving. You can see the artwork's moving back and forth a little bit, and that's totally fine. But as long as this isn't moving out of position, we're in a lot better shape. Now with this character, I want to give him some loose, flexible arms. And right now they're just jagged, straight corners. Now this actually had to do with our design stage. So in our design, we actually had straight edges. What I want to do is I want to create curved edges or curved points. So let's go back to the arm front layer and let's select these 2 points that we created. To select those points, we're going to use the select point tool. And I'm going to go ahead and select those 2 points right there. And now what I want to do is go to my curvature point tool and smooth out that arm. So I'm going to go ahead and select this tool right here. Now what you're going to see is you go back to your bone group and you hit Z on the keyboard for your manipulate bones. Is now we have a more bendy. It's not so much that straight corner anymore. But also something you probably saw as I went to the design stage is now if I go back to this arm, you can see that my bone placement for this bone right here, where it would be rotating, does not match at all where that elbow is. So right now, keeping in mind where that bone is, I'm gonna come right back up here to the bone layer, and I'm gonna select the bone with B on the keyboard. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna hit T on the keyboard, and this is gonna give me my transformed bone. Now, I'm on frame 0 here, so I can move these bones any way I want, even after I had already laid out these bones. So again, the points were right there, and what I can do to kind of give myself more of a better reference, I can come here to this layer, right click it, hit quick settings, and then select paths. Now paths is gonna show me my points even if I'm not on the actual layer. So let's go back to the bone. Now you can see I have a clear idea where that elbow is. So let's go ahead and with T on the keyboard on that transform bone tool, let's go ahead and move that up. Now I'm gonna hold down shift to constrain everything. And I'm just gonna bring my point to right about there. So now when I connect to this forearm bone to this arm bone, it's gonna snap right in place. So I'm just gonna drag that and snap. You can see that it snaps right in place there. And then I can come down here. Again, the bone is gonna be attached to the other bone because this is a parent-child relationship. So anything underneath of it is gonna be controlled by the parent. So what I wanna do is I'm just gonna go ahead and drag this bone down for now. And then I'm gonna take this bone and I'm gonna scale it to right about there. And again, keep it in mind where I want this rotation for this hand. I'm just gonna go ahead and snap it right about there. So now when we take and we bend this arm, you can see we have a little bit better of a bend there. Rigging is a lot of trial and error. Nobody gets it right perfectly at the first time. I don't get it right at the first time. It's trial and error just to see what works, what doesn't. So right now, all we're doing is just figuring out, okay, what do we need exactly to make this arm move as good as we can? Now, all of this can be fixed with what's called smart bones, which we'll get into later. But right now, just do what you can with the bone strength to make sure that nothing controls up here, but also so that you can kind of get a decent result in here with the arm. So that is it for this video. That is flexi binding. Now that you did that, do the back arm using the same steps we used for the front arm. In the next video, we're gonna go over one of the easiest binding methods known as layer binding. I'll see you there. Want to learn more in depth everything there is to know about the rigging tools in Moho, what they are, and how to use them? Then be sure to check out the complete rigging course to know exactly how to rig your character step by step. Want to take the course? Use promo code RIGGING2019 and get the course 50% off. Link is in the description.